Joined now by former Vancouver Canuck and TSN hockey analyst, Mr. Frank Corrado, who did you have something off the top today? You usually have something off the top, Frank. So if there's something you want to get off your chest or
No.
something, no, okay, or we just get
I
straight
just
in.
actually wanted to know, like, are you a Blue Jays fan or are you a Mariners fan?
I'm a Blue Jays fan.
Okay,
Blake is
Blake?
too.
I am a recovering Blue Jays fan. I was a Blue Jays fan for most of my life. I cannot bring myself to watch a single game this year, or
Mm,
really the Vladdy Bichette era.
Uh-oh.
It's not been for me. It's not been for me.
really? Okay. Well, yeah, I was like following the trade deadline yesterday, and it's like, round of applause. Great job. You did a great job. Also, you put yourself in that situation.
Exactly.
So yeah, it
Exactly.
was it was bizarre to see some of the reactions. But I feel you when you say recovering Jays fan because there was so much to be so excited about for such a long period of time, and now it feels like that's pretty far away. You never know with people in Vancouver if they're Jays fans or they hate the Jays and they're Mariners fans. Like it's one or
It's
the
down
other.
the middle.
Yeah.
It's down
Well,
the middle.
I'll say a few things. I am a Jays fan, but outside of the three times they play the Mariners all year, I have no grudge against the M's. I like to see them do well.
Yeah.
I think it's good for baseball in this community as well. The other thing I'll say is they call that a trade deadline. Frankie, it was a 2-hour show on ESPN leading up to the deadline.
Is that all
All
they
they
do?
all they talked about was trades. They didn't have any monkeys. They didn't have
Yeah,
Plinko. They didn't have
exactly.
any hijinks. It
Yeah.
was straight meat and potatoes trade deadline, like sketching out prospects and things like that. That's
Brutal.
not how you trade
I
deadline,
guess
bro.
I guess some people are very committed to it, very committed to their craft, and some people want the easy way out. I don't know. I don't know
That's
what to
right.
tell you.
Anyways, prefer the way hockey does it, even when there's nothing going on, and Duthie and you lot have to pitter pat
Yeah,
for hours on end.
yeah.
You played with Daniel Sprong. Tell us about the Daniel Sprong you know, Frank.
Yeah, so I played with him when it was his first year pro. And he, what's funny, like he had a little bit of NHL experience prior to that. Like I think he played games as either an 18 or a 19-year-old. So he got that taste right away. And I think you guys know what happens when you get that experience and then you sort of have this expectation of how things are supposed to be or what you're supposed to get. And I think early in his career, he may have got caught up in that a little bit, like I'm supposed to be at this point because I've done that and I got that opportunity. And so I played with him in the minors, and I think there was a little bit of an adjustment there, just kind of realizing like you still have to work on your game. No one's going to hand you things. You do have to earn it. And I actually caught up with him this year. The Red Wings were playing Montreal, and just talking to him before the game, like he just seems so different than he was as a young kid. Like I feel like the league has kind of humbled him a little bit, and I think he understands what he's all about, what his game is all about, how that maybe fits or doesn't fit. And give him credit because he's had basically 3 good years in a row when it comes to goal scoring, but I feel like his mindset has definitely switched a little bit from when he was the young player who, wanted everything right away to the guy now who really has to, take the 1 year deal, prove yourself, earn it, and then has to do it again, which, is probably, it's a pretty tough situation to be in for a guy that can score 20 goals on any given year.
Did he
We've
think he was
heard
better than he was? Is that what one of the issues was?
I would say not that he was better than he was, Blake. Like confidence was never an issue for him. Like we're talking about a guy that on a 2-on-1 with Alex Ovechkin, he's got no problem looking him off and saying I can snipe this one. Like a confidence is not the issue. I just think early on, you're 18, you're 19, you're 20, and I was probably a victim of this as well. You just need to mature a little bit. Like mentally, you just need to mature a little bit. And I think, from talking to him this past year, I left that conversation thinking it's a very different guy than I knew when I was 20 years old. Like I think he has matured a lot, and I think he's going into a very good situation here where he's got people that are familiar with him, his personality, where he's been, where his career arc has kind of taken him, and someone who probably understands in Rick Tocchet how to level with a player like that, and how to try and make the demands so that they're reasonable and attainable, for a player who can give you a lot of offense with limited minutes. And that's something he's done basically the last few seasons, and how to get the most out of that guy. So I think, as far as if you were looking around for good fits for Daniel Sprong in the NHL this year, Vancouver would have had to have been right near the top, just based on that familiarity with everyone involved.
Where are you putting them in the lineup? What line does that skill set work with best, do you think?
I know it's interesting because he's played lower in the lineup and he's scored goals. But then, you watch Detroit play last year, and I had to watch them a bunch towards the end of the year, and it's like Sprong's not out there because it's a close game. But a close game, you could also use a goal yourself, but you're looking for someone that can, kind of lock things down a little bit. So, he's one of those guys where he can get lost in the shuffle a little bit depending on the way the game is going. He's not an overly tenacious forechecker. He's not overly physical, but when he has the puck on his stick, he's ready to shoot it. He commands the puck a lot. I think his playmaking ability is probably a little bit underrated because I kind of think of him, and I think other people just think of him as a shooter. And he can make plays as well. Um, you know, it's interesting because you always think about versatile players being the guys that are trustworthy, and a little more reliable. In a different way, I would say that Sprung is versatile. I would say he's versatile because when you put him higher in the lineup, he's probably going to play with guys that can get him the puck a little bit more to get his shot off. But he's displayed over the last, I don't know, last year or whatever, that he doesn't have to be a top six player in order to give you a little bit of offense. So it's a different type of versatility than the standard guy that we think of, that you just kind of peg up and down the lineup.
Where's his power play fit?
I would think it's a second unit power play player. And it's
Spot, Frankie?
probably,
Like, bumper spot, or where would you put him?
well, so that's like, I don't mind him in the bumper spot because I feel like when he's there, it's a quick pass and it's back out, or it's a shot. I wouldn't envision him being a guy who's rounding high on the half wall, attacking downhill, that you're going to entrust to kind of orchestrate the thing. Like, I think he's going to be seen as the guy, like, okay, the play is finishing, it's on his stick and it's on the net, or it's a quick little bump play, and then it's to the net. Like, I don't think you're not kind of game planning through him. And to be honest with you, a player like that is probably pretty tailor made for a second power play unit because you have limited minutes anyways. And so when you do get on there, like, the onus is on you guys to get a couple shots and create something of quality. So I could see him being a pretty dangerous bumper player. And you know what? Worst case scenario, if he is I don't know, if he is a half wall one timer guy, like, maybe you're not running things through his side, but if you can find him on the back door, or you can find him for a one timer, like, there's a pretty threatening option there as well. I don't think it goes through him. I think he's
Yeah.
the finishing piece on anything you're going to drop on the power play.
Look, we hear hasn't been Mr. Popularity in the room. Is that just the cockiness, or is there any sort of anything else at play? There's a confrontational. Is it, the laziness on the defensive side? Like, what hasn't made him Mr. Popularity in rooms? Why has he bounced around
It's
as much?
it's funny with Spronger. Like, I think he's a really nice kid. Like, he's nice, he's polite. I think when he was younger, there was a little bit of like a, I should be elsewhere. I should be in the NHL, or the first line, or the first power play. And I think as time goes on, or as time has gone on, I think he has ditched a lot of that along the way. And like we said, like, we talk about it all the time, like, the NHL humbles you. It is a very humbling experience playing in the NHL. Um, so I don't know, like, I don't know if he's going to come into Vancouver and he's going to be, Mr. Not Popular. I just think, when you have that kind of attitude sometimes, especially when you're a younger guy, it can rub guys the wrong way. and maybe they get the wrong idea about you. And, it's sometimes hard to communicate, what you actually mean or what you actually feel in those types of situations. And he may have, he may have put himself in those spots for sure, but he also may have been the victim of a little bit of that. But, just going back to the conversation I had with him last year, before one of the games, I left that conversation thinking, like, I haven't seen this kid in probably hadn't seen him in 5, 6 years at that point, and I was like, that it's a different sounding guy than when I played with when he was 20 years old, and I was happy to hear what I heard from him, even the tone of it, and I think he comes into Vancouver now where, he's had some pretty good years in a row. The contract, it's funny because you compare these contracts with what the analytics companies tell you players should get and what they actually get, and there's a pretty large discrepancy there. So that should tell you something that, you're getting an opportunity here based on the fact that, you have good production, you're going to have some people that believe in you, but not everyone was willing to believe in you. So that should be humbling as well. And I think that, it's like when the coach plays you 25 minutes or the coach plays you 12 minutes. You kind of know where you stand. I think you can read into that a little bit if you're the player and understand, where things have been at for you. But like I said, good opportunity for him, and I think he has learned a lot along the way with his experiences.
Depending
Uh,
on
it-
health on any given night to start the season, the Canucks could have anywhere from 9 to 11 players in the lineup coming off of 15 goal seasons. So we're asking about offense for next year in our poll question. Can they score more goals? Or is there enough, you know, guys that maybe peaked with career highs at 15, 16, 17 goals that, you're not going to get that out of them on the yearly. How do you see this going down? And also, we've talked about this too. The blue line is probably a little less talented than it was, and of course, having a good blue line helps to feed the offense.
and just
Yeah,
for Frank's edification, they finished sixth in the league last year, Frank, with 279 goals.
I was gonna say, like, so they were sixth in the NHL last year. I don't know how much more they can score. Like, I think if you're a top 5, 6 team in the NHL, like, that's really good. The thing that Vancouver had going for them last year is that all these guys had, or a lot of these guys had bloated shooting percentages. They were scoring more than they ever had, and you can't bank on all these guys having career years every single year. Like, it just doesn't work that way. You're going to get some kind of market correction. What I do think is more important for this team this year, is that you're scoring the goals at the right time. Last year for the first half of the year, certain players like, Hronik was on fire. The team, it just felt like everything was going in, and all the conversation was about the PDO and how this is going to, change and correct itself. It did to a certain degree. I don't think it came crashing down the way people, expected it to. But, later in the season and leading into the playoffs, I think if you have a little bit of that mojo going where you're like, that's when you want things to be just kind of filtering in for you. Like, you'll get by the first half of the season, first 2/3 of the season, thinking, man, it's been a grind to score goals. But then if the floodgates kind of open up later on, like, that'll do more for you than kind of having that earlier in the year. But I think if they're a top 10 team when it comes to goals for, and hopefully they're in that top 6 or 7 category again, I think that's exactly where they should be. And if they're improved from there, kudos to them, because they've obviously made some adjustments in the way they played and they found a little something. And Blake, to your point, not having the, same caliber of puck movers on the back end, like that could be something for sure. That's also why you brought in DeBrusque. It's also why you bring in Sprong. It's also why you have a Danton Heinen now playing lower in the lineup. And hopefully Brock Besser is the same Brock Besser and JT Miller, and maybe Elias Pettersson, finds his form from 2 years ago where he's, a 100-point player. So, I think when you look at the players that had career years, the players that maybe have a little more to give, it might balance itself a little bit. And if everything goes well, they're right back. They're right back to that 6, 7, 5 area when it comes to goals for in the NHL.
Yeah. I'm not going to break it down with you in terms of how we see it and how everybody is scoring goals, but answer me this, because Talkett last week mused that he thought DeBrusk would be perfect for Miller and Besser, and then sort of caught himself and went, no, but I know I got to give Pettersson, better wingers this year. Let's just play that out for a second. What would you make of DeBrusk with Miller and Besser? And then trickle down, do you think Sprong would work with Pettersson?
Well, I think if Pedersen is going to be able to drive the bus a little bit more, which sounds crazy because we've talked about it so much of who he's had to carry with him basically last year. If he can be a little more of a self starter, then yes, I think Sprong would be a good fit there. You're going to have a guy that's inclined to shoot and a guy in Pedersen who I think is, yes, inclined to shoot, but also is a very slick and kind of tricky playmaker. So I don't think it's a bad fit, Matt. It would be interesting though if DeBrusk finds a home with Miller and Besser, and that would feel like you're really loading up that line. And I don't mind it. It then it depends who are you giving to Elias Pettersson. And is it Hoglander? Is it Heinen? And what does that look like? Because like let's be honest. The third line last year with Garland, Bluger, and Joshua, I don't know if anyone had that on paper being, what it was. And it was a great line. Sometimes things just click and they work. And if DeBrusk goes up and has to play with Miller and Besser, and that's a really good line, and you find a little secret sauce with Sprong and Pedersen and, player X who maybe it's Hoglander, maybe it's Heinen, I don't know, and it just works, then hey, it just works. Or maybe Dakota Joshua works there. I don't know. But that's the beautiful thing now about the way the lineup kind of is constructed, where you'll have some versatile pieces. You'll have some guys that can play higher, some guys that can play lower, and they should have a little more offensive firepower from some guys that can hopefully repeat that, six, best goals in the NHL last year.
I got one more question for you, my dude.
Just before we leave that,
Yep.
if you're putting DeBrusk with Miller and Besser, it's got to be the best line in hockey. Like for you to keep it together, like it's got to be performing every single night and looking scintillating, considering you're robbing Pettersson of that line. Right?
Yes,
Like
it would have to be unbelievable. It would. It
yeah,
would have to be what with the
Auto line.
McDavid, Hyman, whoever you have with them, Nugent Hopkins, like whoever. That's what we'd be talking about. We'd be talking about this line is on fire. These guys are getting 2 points a night. Like,
yeah.
and if it's not that, then you're taken away from what could be with Pedersen and DeBrusk. Unless Blake, you do Pedersen and DeBrusk, and you're like, holy smokes, that's ugly, and it doesn't work. But I don't see that being the case. I think they're both
Yeah.
very good players.
It would have to be like Lotto line, basically, or the
Yeah.
Twins and Burrows at that level. Lastly, and we absolutely love Talkett here, Frank, because he gives you the internal debate. He just lays it on out there as he did with the Athletic and Thomas Drance last week. But talking about the Edmonton series, talking about watching it back, about how he's kicking himself about several opportunities, and then out and out musing about how he's got to loosen the reins somewhat this year. He's got to allow for offensive players to have more offensive creativity, particularly when they cross the blue line. Is there a risk here that he gets caught in between, that we take away the staples that made them so successful, and successful mostly because they played great team defense, held on to pucks, didn't give up much opportunity at the risk of rush chances? Is there a chance that the meter moves too far on the other side with Talkett allowing some of this offensive creativity and looking to push the pace a little bit more and generate those rush chances?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so because, worst case scenario, Matt, you can just tighten it back up and you know what it looks like. And you know you're going to get buy-in from you guys. And chances are, if you've had to do that, you see an issue, the players see an issue, the players feel an issue. And to be honest with you, like players want to be coached. Players want to have success, and whatever is going to lead to that success, I think for the most part, guys will buy into that. But it is when he says from the blue line in, and he's obviously talking about the offensive blue line in, that's where you got to let your creative guys like go to work. And you can give them, a couple principles, but you don't need to overcoach it from the blue line in. Like that's where it's all about feel. That's where a guy like Pedersen will feel, when a defender is going to reach his stick out and he can slide it underneath for a pop pass. Now, that player being in the right position for the pop pass, that's where a little bit of that, those principles have to come into place. But no, I agree. I agree with Talkit. I don't think you need to overcoach that. Like the principles that kind of stick with you over the years in the offensive zone. And I was a defenseman, so obviously I was standing at the blue line most of the time. And as time went on, defensemen got more involved in the play offensively. Like we were told to move in off the blue line, not just stand there. Where earlier on in my career, it was like, let's make the zone as big as we can. So defensemen feed on the blue line and go side to side, and that's about it. Let the forwards do the rest of the work. It doesn't work that way anymore. Now defensemen are getting more involved. But the things that the forwards always kind of had to keep in mind was the more you can change sides, the more you can have the puck change sides, the more you're going to spread out the D zone coverage. So now the D zone coverage, instead of making things small and contained and controlled to one side of the ice, now they got to move. And the more they move, the more there's an opportunity for them to mess it up, because now they got to get to a spot. Now they got to make a read. You're making them think, and you're making all five guys think at the same time. So now there's more of an opportunity there. The other thing, that's, principle or whatever that you're always going to have is you're going to have one guy basically in like that soft spot area, high slot. Some people call it the honey hole. It's just like a little, that's, the bumper position on the power play. Like you will try and have a presence there a lot of the times. And that because that player, ultimately, if the puck gets turned over, he's going to be your first forward going back into your own zone. Outside of that, I mean, let these guys do what they do. You didn't tell the Sedin twins how to play in the offensive zone for obvious reasons. Guys like, Besser, Miller, Pedersen, DeBrusk, like these guys have done it for a long time. It's about feel. So outside of those, those few principles, I agree. Like let them do their thing. And if it does come to the point where it's getting sloppy or it doesn't look right, you can always kind of tighten it up. But there's nothing wrong with giving guys a little more leash offensively.
Don't want Demko trying to pull off Dominic Hasek like saves those while going post to post on the regular either, right? So
also, yes, no kidding, and especially early in the year, like
yeah.
Demko last year, earlier in the year, Vancouver was giving up, high danger chances like crazy. And he kept them in it for a long time. And you know what, to talk it and the team's credit, as the season went on, those high danger chances became less and less. Like they really did a good job of kind of buttoning things up defensively. But earlier on in the year,
a high danger chances for and against.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything
They did
plummeted.
it both ways.
Everything plummeted. We saw some really fun hockey last year, October through December.
Yeah.
And then
it went from
January
high
came.
danger to low danger very quickly.
Exactly. Well, we went from high event to low event.
Yeah.
In the course of one season, it was truly a tale of two halves.
Yeah.
And a Canucks season for the ages in one regard, but just a bizarro turn of events throughout the hockey club. Great stuff, Frank. Thank you for this, my dude. We'll catch up
All right,
soon.
boys. We'll talk.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.